Greetings, Cowann here, and you're checking into another episode of Cowann's Corner. Alright, so today I'm really excited to announce to you guys that I just got word that an op-ed that I submitted to the Courier Journal last night around midnight, this morning I actually got word that they're going to publish it in the Tuesday edition of the Courier Journal. So I'm really excited about that. I'm not sure if it's just going to be the e-publication online or if they're going to actually put it in the printed version. Either way, I'm super excited, and by the time this drops, we'll probably know, and most likely I'll be able to drop a link in the description and be able to share it with you. But the reason why I wanted to go ahead and hop on here was because the topic of the op-ed, as excited as I am to be able to get my work out there, the topic wasn't quite as exciting. Well, not that the topic's not exciting, but the topic was a bit somber in nature. So for those of you that live in Louisville, and those of you that don't, I'll make you aware that on the evening of June 1st, 2024, there was actually a shooting where 6 young people, originally they said 6 minors, but I think since they discovered that it was 5 minors and another, I guess, young adult, that were shot at a party in the PRP area of Louisville. So this kind of prompted me to think about, with all of the ongoing violence in the world, but specifically in Louisville as of late, this is an epidemic, this is a problem, this is something that we've been continuing to live through. So that topic is something that I want to write about, what is the root cause of that? It's really easy for us to say, well, it's gun violence, right? If we get guns off the street, the less guns there are, the less people are getting shot. And then we'll have people that will say that the Second Amendment tells us that we have a right to bear arms, and the problem is not guns, because guns don't kill people, people kill people. So the point is that what I really think it boils down to, and I couldn't really articulate this in 500 words or less in my op-ed, but the greatest challenge I believe, and this is just Cowann's hot take, but what I believe the greatest issue that we're facing in our world is ideological tribalism. So what that is to state is that so often we have the tendency to say that, well, first of all, let me give you this perspective. I believe that we all are the main character in our own story. Most of us like to think of ourselves as the good guys, you know. I'm sure some more edgy people might think of themselves as being the anti-hero, but regardless, we can see our own motivations, our own values, our own perspectives, and that guides us to believe that on some level, we're the good guy. So with that, we have a tendency to align ourselves with perspectives and other people that share like-minded vantage points, and we look at them as also being the good guys. This is a very black and white dualistic perspective, to where we look at the people that we agree with as being more positive, and those that we disagree with as being more negative, or the bad guys. Now, very few people will admit this or acknowledge this, because nobody wants to be deemed as prejudiced. Nobody wants to be deemed as being super simplistic. But if you really think about it, whether we're talking about the Second Amendment versus gun control, whether we're talking about Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter, or All Lives Matter, or whatever it is, Lives Matter, the reality is, and I think that this really resonated to me during 2020, during the pandemic, when we were all kind of stuck inside and we were on social media for so long. You know, the first part of 2020, we were all kind of kumbaya, and social media was the greatest thing to connect us. And then all of a sudden, Breonna Taylor happened, and George Floyd happened, and all of the tragedies that divide us happen. And what I've noticed during that time period, I don't want to say more so than any, but at least for me, while I'm stuck in a house, now granted I was an essential worker, so I wasn't stuck in the house, but we weren't able to connect in the same way and gather in the same way. But what I noticed is that people felt the need to coincide with a specific community, whether it was their political ideology, whether it was their faith, whether it was race, religion, whatever it could be. But I noticed that there is, and for lack of better words, I just keep using the phrase ideological tribalism. And what that fancy pants $5 phrase that I'm using means is that we have a tendency to agree with those that we seem most like-minded with. And that means that in doing so, we see the opposition as sometimes being less than, again, not something that we'll ever form our mouths to say out loud, but if you think about it cognitively, that's how we're able to justify. Oftentimes, whether we're talking about Palestine or Israel, people are looking for who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. Is it Russia? Is it Ukraine? We try to oversimplify things and consider which side should I take based off of merits, who gets the most checks. And oftentimes, whether it's I'm a Democrat and I identify as being leftist and I'm more liberal minded, therefore I'm going to support this straight down the ballot perspective, and this is the way that I need to start looking at the world, or vice versa. Whether I'm conservative, I'm Republican, I'm looking at things from a more right-wing perspective. But we have a tendency to align so closely with those perspectives because we feel comfort in being able to identify with a group. And I think that groupthink makes it so that it's difficult for us to sometimes see the humanity in others. And I think that when we have less humanity, when we see other people as being subhuman, lack of better words, if we don't see the humanity in other people, then we start to view people as being subhuman. And it's really easy. It's a very, very, very slippery slope to go from seeing everybody as my brother, everybody as my sister, that we are the world and we should unify, versus what's the old phrase, united we stand, divided we fall. So it's really easy to find so much divisiveness in the world that will simply lead us to looking at, value of human life as not being quite as valuable. And to me, that is how it's so easy for people to pick up a gun and shoot other people. Because something about our world has made it so that human life, which is the most precious thing that we could ever have, no longer has the same value. I also believe, and I can go a million different ways and a million different topics, and I should probably save this for 5 or 10 different videos because I can't shove it all into one. So I don't want to be super rambly, but I believe that there's also, as far as why do we have so much gun violence, I think that I grew up in an era, for better or for worse, right or for wrong, where people would simply get into fistfights if they had disagreements. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying that I'm proud of this and this makes the world a better place, but people would square up, they knuckle up, they have their differences, they get into a fight. But I believe that something about this generation, and it might be pride, it might be ego, hell, it might be social media, that makes it so that I will not lose. So people are scared to take a good old-fashioned butt kick, and people are scared that they might get hurt, that they might lose. But if I have a gun and I shoot you and I kill you, then I can show that I'm the bigger person, But as I think it was in a Kendrick Lamar song, he said, the one in front of the gun lasts forever, So the person whose life is taken is the one that ends up on the t-shirt, right? And the one that is idolized. And the person who takes that life is vindicated, or they're not vindicated, they're vilified. But for some reason, I don't know if it's the Grand Theft Auto culture of video games, and believe me, I'm a gamer, or at least a collector of games these days. I love video games, so I'm not trying to vilify them either. I grew up with Mortal Kombat, and I remember when they were trying to ban that from existence, and you had to put in the cheat code. Y'all remember on Sega, ABACABB, to get the blood code, right? But video games are so realistic, they're so lifelike, that You know, people, I believe we've become desensitized, and not just video games, but all forms of media that we consume. Social media, where everything is in sound bites and short clicks, our attention span has now been minimized to where we can't really focus on critical thinking or long-term planning of anything, because we live in the, let me see this 10, 30, 60-second tops clip. As a matter of fact, if you make it all the way through this video, I commend you, and I really appreciate you for taking the time to listen to what it is that I have to say. Because in an era where everything is so fleeting, it's difficult for us to sit down and have a conversation with somebody, especially somebody who has a different vantage point, a different perspective on the world than our own. So I think there's so many challenges, whether it's people having too much pride and being fearful about the ramifications of disagreements, people feeling the need to resort to gun violence and to make a irreversible solution to a temporary emotion. You know, I think that there's so many different challenges going on in the world, and we can't possibly cover them all in this video, but I know y'all can hear that I'm tempted to try to discuss all of the issues in the world, and we can't do that, so I'm gonna have to save some of this for another episode of Cowann's Corner. But what I wanna really get to, the point, is that ideological tribalism and the idea that we look at people as groups, we label people, we view things in very, as I mentioned before, black and white, dualistic perspectives, where it's so difficult for us to see the shades of gray that are in between. That rather than believing that I have to be either liberal or I have to be a conservative, then we have difficulty with seeing the merits in the other perspective. So we start to, without doing a whole lot of research, agree with people that fit our narrative. And I think that our willingness and ability to adopt a group so that we can feel like we belong to something bigger and greater than ourselves is sometimes scary. And we often tell the youth not to join gangs, but that's essentially what we as grown people sometimes do. You know, we don't always do the critical thinking necessary to say, hey, I might vote this way, but that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that my party says. I might like this person even though they represent a different party. And this isn't, I don't mean to make this just about politics. This again goes for so many other perspectives. And I think that we just lose the humanity and we get into these silos, and we start talking so bad and so ill to each other, especially on social media, where we're keyboard warriors. We're just attacking each other with keyboards. And I'm pushing buttons. I hope I didn't mess up this video. Let me keep on talking. Hopefully we still have it. So the point that I'm trying to get to, I don't know who shot those 6 people, and thank God that, and I should have led in with this, to my knowledge, those injuries weren't critical. That those lives weren't lost, that those young people's existence was not stolen. And to the best of my knowledge, as of today, June 3rd, that I'm recording this, those people will be okay. But how many instances have we had where people aren't going to be okay, where people aren't going to be around to see tomorrow because of a split decision that somebody who was emotionally dysregulated made? So as a licensed clinical social worker, as a therapist, I have this really unique perspective where I have the opportunity to spend 60 minutes with several people, like 6 different people a day, where I get to hear their perspective and their vantage point. And guess what? At least half the people that I meet with, they don't share the same political ideology. They don't share the same belief system. They don't share the same religious affiliation. They don't share a lot of the things that I have. But my job is to be able to support them, to validate them, and to remain neutral and not to argue with them. And in doing that, I've realized that very rarely are there situations where there's good people and bad people. There's people that do good things and people that do bad things, but very rarely, barring the true psychopath or sociopath out there that are going out and shooting up places, there's very rarely somebody that's truly a bad person. If you sit down and you talk to them long enough, then there's usually some type of supportive evidence, or maybe just some ignorance and unknowing, that will validate the way that they see the world. But we don't believe in civil discourse. We don't believe in sitting down and having these debates with other people to learn, to understand how and why they see the world the way they do. And it's our differences, it's the division that we have that makes us so far apart. It's this social media, and I'm not knocking social media. I'm on a social media platform as you're watching this. I'm using YouTube, right? And you might be watching this on Facebook. You might be watching this on Instagram. I don't know how you're watching this. I use my phone to stay connected with people. But let me reframe that. I use my phone to communicate with people, because true connection requires a little bit more than a tweet, a retweet, a like, a follow. I hope that I'm able to offer some semblance of connection with some people on here. But if you don't truly know who Cowann is, then this is probably just kind of an avatar, and you're probably creating some kind of narrative of who I am based off of the words that you've watched from this video and maybe some other videos that you've seen. But to truly connect with somebody requires sometimes sitting down and really being able to have an exchange. And I think there's not enough of that going on in the world. So I hope that this video offers a little bit more than my 560 or so word op-ed will, and gives a little bit more clarification on what I mean when I say ideological tribalism is probably the biggest monster that we're facing in our society, because it conditions us to believe that people that think like us are good, and people that have different cultures, different beliefs, different backgrounds are bad. And I don't believe the world is that simple. So I hope that you are able to take some words and yield some, and I'm not some kind of an all-knowing sage. I don't mean to come at you in that way, but I hope that I've said something that might trigger some kind of a change in your thought process, so that you'll be able to look at somebody that maybe you didn't agree with before in a different light. I hope that you're able to go forth and make the most out of today. Connect with somebody that you don't like, connect with somebody that you love, but just take the opportunity to connect, because that's what the world needs. The world needs more love. Speaking of which, much love to you. Please, thank you again for taking the time to get through this almost 20 minutes, 17 minutes, 38 seconds going strong. Probably need to take a sip, but please like, subscribe, share, and check out some more videos that are coming your way. I love doing this. I love sharing content. I love being able to get my perspective out to the world. And of course, you'll have a link to my op-ed, which will be a much more concise version of this. Much love to you, and I hope that you're able to find happiness and success in whatever that looks like for you. Take care.